is the Rosetta Stone. It was the key to understanding Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it is one of the most precious and valuable treasures of the British Museum.
For more than 2,000 years, the Rosetta Stone has been treated as a linguistic key, a relic that unlocked the voices of ancient Egypt and allowed the modern world to read hieroglyphs for the very first time. But what if this story was only half complete? What if the inscriptions we thought we understood were missing an entire layer of meaning, a layer so subtle, so deeply encoded, that no human mind could ever detect it? Today, for the first time in history, a team of researchers has fed ultra-high-resolution scans of the Rosetta Stone into an advanced pattern recognition AI. This system wasn't trained to translate words. It was trained to expose hidden structures, microscopic alterations, mathematical sequences, and symbolic patterns buried beneath the text we already know. What the AI found shocked the researchers. Because behind the familiar declarations of kings and taxes, behind the ceremonial language and ancient proclamations, there appears to be something else, a message intentionally disguised, a sequence concealed across scripts woven through 3 languages and preserved for over 20 centuries, waiting for the one era in human history capable of detecting it. Tonight, we reveal what the AI uncovered and why some experts are calling its conclusions terrifying. For more than 2 centuries, the Rosetta Stone has stood as one of archaeology's most recognizable artifacts, a slab of dark granodiorite that unlocked an entire lost language. Its 3 scripts, carved in 196 BC, allowed scholars to finally understand the hieroglyphic system that had been silent for nearly 2 millennia. Museums display it behind glass, schoolbooks describe it as a straightforward historical key, and most assume its secrets were exhausted long ago. But beneath its familiar surface lies a puzzle that no human eye ever recognized. A new generation of researchers has returned to the stone with tools the early Egyptologists could never imagine. Their most ambitious instrument is an advanced multi-layer spectral imaging AI engineered to peel away centuries of damage, restoration, and mineral accretion. Unlike earlier scanners, this system can analyze microscopic textures, detect pigment residues too faint for human vision, and trace the depths of engraved symbols at sub-millimeter precision. To the scientists involved, it is less a camera and more a probe capable of examining the artifact as if it were newly carved. The first scans behave exactly as expected. The AI maps the well-known inscriptions, the hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek texts, confirming details scholars have published for decades. But as the imaging deepens, the machine begins isolating irregularities, geometries that do not correspond to the documented decree, faint cuts hidden beneath the main glyphs, and symmetrical marks that seem older than the visible surface. These anomalies are not scratches or natural wear. They follow patterns. When the technical team reviews the AI's flagged regions, they realize the stone contains far more complexity than its outward appearance suggests. Across its face, beneath the familiar decree, lie indications of multiple superimposed layers, etchings that were buried, overwritten, or perhaps deliberately concealed. The discovery is quiet at first, almost easy to dismiss, until the frequency of these hidden markings increases with every pass of the scanner. Egyptologists brought in to consult react with caution. They have long known the stone is only a fragment of a larger stele, and that its history is more turbulent than most people assume. Yet the idea of uncovering information deliberately removed or obscured raises uncomfortable questions. If earlier craftsmen altered a monument of this significance, what were they attempting to preserve or hide? Scholars warn that interpreting such features recklessly could misrepresent an entire chapter of ancient thought. Meanwhile, the AI behaves in an unexpected way. Having detected new structures, it requests additional datasets and deeper spectral access, as if the stone's interior composition holds a logic it is trying to complete. Engineers note the anomaly, uncertain whether it indicates a software fault or a genuine archaeological breakthrough. The tension grows quietly around the laboratory, not from fear of danger, but from a growing awareness that the Rosetta Stone may not be the transparent historical tool the modern world believes it to be. Something older, more layered, and far less understood is waiting beneath its carved surface. Long before modern researchers aimed advanced scanners at the Rosetta Stone, its story began in a world struggling to define its identity. In 196 BC, Egypt stood at a crossroads under the young Ptolemy V, a ruler navigating internal unrest, foreign influence, and a priesthood whose authority stretched back thousands of years. The decree carved into the stone was meant to stabilize this fragile moment, a political promise engraved in 3 scripts so that every community under the crown could read it. But the artisans who shaped the text seemed to carry an awareness that their work reached beyond political duty. Subtle variations in the carving suggest they were embedding something more than a royal message. The slab itself, a fragment of a larger stele, was crafted from granodiorite quarried far from the delta. Its surface shows signs of multiple working phases, as if earlier inscriptions had been smoothed away to make room for the decree. While the known text praises the king and outlines religious duties, faint irregularities indicate that the stone had a life even before the Ptolemaic inscription was added. These faint traces, invisible to past generations, now hold renewed meaning. Centuries later, in 1799, a group of French soldiers digging near the walls of Fort Julien uncovered the stone by chance. Its trilingual inscription immediately drew attention, and after the political tide shifted, it passed into British possession. From there, it became an object of intense academic focus. Thomas Young's early observations showed that the scripts were connected, but it was Jean-François Champollion who ultimately recognized the phonetic nature of hieroglyphs, restoring a lost voice to ancient Egypt. Their efforts transformed the stone into a doorway, a path that allowed scholars to reconstruct rituals, laws, myths, and personal narratives that had disappeared from human memory. Yet as archaeology matured, inconsistencies in the stone's inscriptions grew harder to ignore. Some hieroglyphs are cut deeper than others without clear reason. Certain lines contain gaps where grammatical markers should appear. In the Demotic text, subtle shifts in line alignment suggest corrections or adjustments made after the initial carving. These features were long regarded as mistakes made by hurried artisans or unavoidable wear accumulated over centuries. Recent examinations challenge that assumption. The deeper study of carving sequences and surface layering implies deliberate modification. The missing connectors appear to align with erased symbols beneath the visible text. Slight distortions in the Greek portion mirror irregularities in the hieroglyphic lines above it, as if earlier content had been selectively masked or overwritten. The stone's role as a linguistic bridge becomes only part of its significance. Beneath the familiar decree, a more complex history may be waiting. This evolving understanding reshapes the Rosetta Stone not as a simple artifact of translation, but as a palimpsest, a surface used more than once, shaped by competing intentions across generations. The more scholars return to its origins, the more it appears that the stone was never purely a political proclamation. It may have been designed to protect knowledge from an even earlier time, preserved in layers only now coming into focus. As the new imaging analysis progresses, the Rosetta Stone begins to reveal a complexity that scholars never anticipated. Its familiar inscriptions, 3 scripts arranged to communicate a single decree, start to look less like parallel translations and more like intersecting layers of intention. The AI system, designed to read texture as well as text, examines each symbol across the hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek sections, measuring minute differences in pressure, carving angle, and mineral exposure. What it produces is a map not of language, but of subtle distortions that seem too consistent to be accidental. Within this map, 52 glyphs stand out. Their depth is slightly shallower, their spacing unusually tight, or their alignment a fraction off from the surrounding text. On their own, such variations could be dismissed as craftsmanship quirks. But when plotted across the entirety of the stone, they form a faint but unmistakable pattern. The symbols appear positioned with a rhythm, as if responding to an underlying structure rather than simply translating a royal decree. Archaeologists studying the AI's findings return to the physical artifact with fresh eyes. Under magnification, they detect microscopic incisions beneath the polished surface, indications that the stone was carved more than once. These faint traces do not align with the Ptolemaic decree at all. Instead, they point to an earlier use, perhaps from a monument whose purpose has long been forgotten. Their style does not match known hieroglyphic conventions, nor do they conform to the grammatical systems of later Egyptian scripts. As specialists compare these marks to early cultural symbols, they notice similarities to pre-literate ritual notations, signs used before writing developed into a formal system. These proto-symbols, rarely seen on durable monuments, suggest the stone's earliest function may have been ceremonial rather than administrative. If so, the decree of Ptolemy V was carved atop something far older, preserving fragments of a tradition that predates dynastic Egypt. The Greek inscription introduces puzzles of its own. Portions of the text, when re-examined through enhanced imaging, show phrasing that resembles literary formulas from later centuries. The presence of such structures in a 2nd century BC document raises difficult questions. Were scribes preserving fragments of older works, or does this reveal the influence of texts not previously accounted for? In academic circles, the growing consensus is cautious but increasingly firm. The Rosetta Stone was not created simply to clarify a political message across languages. Its layered construction and unusual inconsistencies suggest a more deliberate effort, one aimed at concealing or preserving information rather than displaying it openly. The familiar inscriptions may serve as a mask, while the hidden engravings hint at knowledge intentionally embedded for those who knew where to look. With each revelation, the stone's reputation shifts from a tool of translation to a vessel of mysteries, harboring remnants of belief systems and linguistic forms that once shaped early human understanding. The sense that something deeper is encoded within its surface grows stronger, guiding researchers toward questions that stretch far beyond the scope of ordinary archaeology. As deeper scans continue, the Rosetta Stone begins to reveal a presence that no scholar expected. What was once regarded as a carefully polished slab of granodiorite now appears to hold traces of pigments far beneath the visible carvings. The AI's spectral analysis isolates a narrow band of light, reflecting faint residues that do not match any known restoration materials. These pigments seem embedded in the stone's earliest layers, suggesting the surface once carried markings that predate all 3 familiar scripts. The team feeds the pigment mapping into the reconstruction module. Slowly, shapes emerge, symbols unlike anything documented in the long history of writing. They share none of the structural features of hieroglyphics, demotic curves, or the angular forms of Proto-Sinaitic scripts, nor do they resemble the wedge-shaped impressions of Mesopotamian cuneiform. Instead, their geometry seems deliberately abstract, built from repeated arcs and intersecting lines, as though the original engravers were encoding meaning indirectly. Linguists and specialists in early religious practices review the reconstructions with careful attention. Some recognize superficial similarities to ritual marks found on small votive objects from Egypt's prehistoric periods, signs believed to guide ceremonial actions rather than convey spoken language. These marks were deliberately symbolic, meant to be understood only within tightly controlled priestly circles. Yet the symbols uncovered within the stone are far more intricate, layered in a way suggesting a system of knowledge rather than simple ceremonial notation. A recurring sequence stands out. When the AI aligns the symbols chronologically based on carving depth and pigment accumulation, a pattern repeats across the stone. Interpreted through comparative linguistics, it yields a phrase that echoes across multiple attempts at translation. When the signs are aligned, the message awakens. The ambiguity of the sentence leaves the research team divided. Some argue the phrase reflects an old ritual motif, an instruction for priests who once performed astronomical rites tied to seasonal transitions. Others believe it may reference a moment encoded into a broader cycle, a phenomenon observed in the sky or tracked through time. Debate intensifies as the AI proposes a different interpretation altogether. By analyzing spacing ratios and the angles of the reconstructed symbols, it identifies a numerical structure underlying the script. The arrangement is too precise to be ornamental. Statistical modeling suggests the symbols follow a predictive logic, forming sequences that behave like plotted values rather than linguistic components. To the machine, this layer resembles a coded system, one designed to describe events rather than merely symbolize beliefs. The scholars reviewing the data hesitate. A script that merges mathematics, symbolism, and ritual concepts challenges established models of ancient intellectual history, yet the clarity of the patterns leaves little room to dismiss the findings. Something about the stone's earliest layer suggests a purpose more complex than translation or commemoration. It appears to respond to alignment, not only physical, but conceptual, hinting that those who first engraved these symbols possessed a form of knowledge now largely forgotten. As the team continues their analysis, the sense of unease grows. The stone, once valued for its role in deciphering history, is beginning to suggest a design that extends far beyond linguistic utility. The reconstructed layer raises a quiet but persistent question. What message did the ancient engravers intend to preserve, and why did they choose to bury it beneath centuries of script? As the final data sets are processed, the Rosetta Stone yields a revelation that no scholar anticipated. The AI, having mapped every visible script and reconstructed the hidden layer beneath them, begins to merge the information into a single analytical frame. For hours, the output appears chaotic, lines of unrelated marks, scattered sequences, fragments of familiar phrases. Then abruptly, the patterns lock into place. The inscriptions from 3 languages, combined with the enigmatic symbols of the 4th layer, resolve into a unified message. The research team falls silent. Egyptologists who spent their careers studying the stone lean closer to the screen, expecting a technical error. But the AI repeats the result, confirming the structure again and again. The symbols weave together like pieces of a larger mosaic, revealing a message preserved through repeated engraving, erasure, and reinscription across centuries. Those who read the translation show unmistakable discomfort. A few step away, uncertain how to interpret what has emerged. The text does not describe a royal decree at all. It speaks instead of a cycle, an ancient rhythm recognized by a culture older than the Ptolemies, older even than the earliest hieroglyphic traditions. The message suggests that human societies rise and collapse not through random chance, but through intervals shaped by celestial and environmental forces. The stone's hidden layer describes a moment remembered by earlier generations, a time when natural equilibrium failed and the world underwent profound transformation. According to the reconstructed lines, this event was neither myth nor metaphor, but an observation encoded with intention, a record meant to survive kingdoms, languages, and the passing of entire civilizations. One passage references a return of the heavens, a phrase that appears in no other Egyptian text. Astronomers reviewing the alignment diagrams embedded in the symbols note that they correspond to cycles far longer than any ritual calendar. The inscriptions imply that when specific celestial markers align, a configuration charted with remarkable precision, the conditions for upheaval reappear. The final line is the most unsettling. It reads, "What was before will be again, when the heavens return to their first measure." The sentence is plain but carries a solemn weight. Scholars hesitate to comment on its implications, acknowledging that ancient cultures often expressed cosmic events through poetic language. Still, the accuracy of the astronomical mapping embedded in the symbols leaves them uneasy. Quietly, archaeologists compare the indicated alignment to modern calculations. The configuration described is not distant or hypothetical. It approaches within the timescale of the present era. While no researcher claims the message predicts catastrophe, the convergence between ancient observation and contemporary measurement is difficult to ignore. The Rosetta Stone, long viewed as a linguistic key, now appears to hold a purpose far more complex. Its creators layered information across languages and eras, not merely to preserve a decree, but to transmit a warning. Hidden beneath the familiar text, protected by centuries of wear and translation, the message waited for a moment when it could finally be understood.